Greetings and good day to all. We are Group 3, and today we will be discussing our lesson on basketball. Basketball is a game played between two teams of five players, each on a rectangular court, usually indoors. Each team tries to score by tossing the ball through the opponent's goal, an elevated horizontal hoop and net called a basket.
Okay, so first is the history of basketball. Next slide, please. Here is a quotation from the most famous basketball player named LeBron James. He said, I treated it like every day was my last day with a basketball. Next slide, please. History of basketball. Basketball is built into the fabric of Springfield College. The game was invented by Springfield College instructor and graduate student named James Naismith in 1891 and has grown into the worldwide athletic phenomenon we know it to be today. The story of how Naismith invented the game through a charge by Luther Gulick to come up with a new indoor activity that could be played by college students during the long New England winters is well known. What isn't often told is that he created the game in our Springfield College humanics philosophy, educating students in spirit, mind, and body for leadership in service to others. He would later recall that it was his commitment to the Springfield College philosophy of serving others that inspired him to create this great game, a game that soon spread beyond our campus throughout New England and around the world, impacting the lives of hundreds of millions across all ages. Next slide, please. Where basketball is originated. It was the winter of 1891 to 1892. Inside the gymnasium at Springfield College, located in Springfield, Mass., was a group of restless college students. The young men had to be there. They were required to participate in indoor activities to burn off the energy that had been building up since their football season ended. The gymnasium class offered them activities such as marching, calisthenics, and apparatus work, but these were pale substitutes for the more exciting games of football and lacrosse they played in warmer seasons. Next slide, please. The person who invented basketball. The instructor of this class was James Naismith, a 31-year-old graduate student. After graduating from Presbyterian College in Montreal with a theology degree, Naismith embraced his love of athletics and headed to Springfield to study physical education. At the time, a relatively new and unknown academic discipline under Gulick, the superintendent of physical education at the college and today renowned as the father of physical education and recreation in the United States. As Naismith, a second-year graduate student who had been named to the teaching faculty, looked at his class, his mind flashed to the summer session of 1891, when his teacher Gulick introduced a new course in the psychology of play. In class discussions, Gulick had stressed the need for a new indoor game, one that would be interesting, easy to learn, and easy to play in the winter by artificial light. No one in the class had followed up on Gulick's challenge, but now, faced with the end of all the sports season and the students dreading the mandatory and dull-required gymnasium work, the inventor of the basketball, Naismith, had a new motivation. A referee was appointed. The game would be divided into two 15-minute halves with a 5-minute resting period in between. Naismith's then secretary typed up the rules and tacked them on the bulletin board. A short time later, the gym class met, and the teams were chosen with three centers, three forwards, and three guards per side. Two of the centers met at mid-court. Naismith tossed the ball, and the game of basketball was born. Next slide, please. Here is a video of Naismith's radio interview from January 1939.
back to Game Time, presented by Kiel, with huge news regarding the history of our game. A professor at Kansas University has found an audio recording of a radio interview with Dr. James Naismith, the inventor of basketball, from January of 1939. This is fascinating for a multitude of reasons, but especially the education of the basketball world, as Dr. Naismith recalls the birth of basketball in 1891. Let's listen.
Tomorrow night, 15,000 cheering fans will pack Madison Square Garden in New York City to witness a giant basketball doubleheader. In that cheering crowd, sitting in row C, seat 11, will be a modest 77-year-old man. Those fans won't know that he made possible the game they're watching. But you're going to meet him now. Sanger Coffee has brought him here tonight all the way from Lawrence, Kansas. Dr. James A. Naismith, the inventor of basketball. Dr. Naismith, how did you happen to invent basketball?
Well, Mr. Heater, it was in the winter of 1891 when I was physical instructor at Springfield College in Massachusetts. We had a real New England blizzard. For days, the students couldn't go outdoors, so they began roughhousing in the halls. We tried everything to keep them quiet. We tried playing a modified form of football in the gymnasium, but they got bored with that. Something had to be done. One day I had an idea. I called the boys to the gym, divided them up into teams of 9, and gave them an old soccer ball. I showed them 2 peach baskets I'd nailed up at each end of the gym. I told them the idea was to throw the ball into the opposing team's peach basket. I blew a whistle, and the first game of basketball began.
And what rules did you have for your new game, Dr. Naismith?
Well, I didn't have enough, and that's where I made my big mistake. The boys began tackling, kicking and punching in the clinches. They ended up in a free-for-all in the middle of the gym floor. Before I could pull them apart, one boy was knocked out, several of them had black eyes, and one had a dislocated shoulder. It certainly was murder. Well, after that first match, I was afraid they'd kill each other, but they kept nagging me to let them play again. So I made up some more rules. The most important one was that there should be no running with the ball. That stopped tackling and slugging. We tried out the game with those rules, and we didn't have one casualty. We had a fine, clean sport. 10 years later, basketball was being played all over the country. And in 1936, I saw it played for the first time at the Olympic Games. And the whole thing started with a couple of peach baskets I put up in a little gym 48 years ago. I guess it just goes to show what you can do if you have to.
Indeed it does.
So, if not for that blizzard back in 1891, would we even be here?
Here are some fun facts about basketball. Did you know that the first public game of basketball was played in YMCA Gymnasium and was recorded by the Springfield Republican on March 12, 1892? Basketball was initially played with a soccer ball and pitch basket. Referees had to retrieve the ball from the baskets every time players made baskets. And lastly, when you hear Michael Jordan, you probably connect him to his legendary Air Jordans. These shoes used to be against the NBA dress code and were not allowed on the court. Next slide, please.
So now I'll be discussing basketball terms and definitions. Next slide, please. First, we have alley-oop. It is a pass high above the basketball rim that allows a player to catch and slam dunk or drop in the ball in one motion. Alternating possession rule. A rule in which teams take turns possessing the ball after stop plays. Brick. A push shot that bounces hard off the rim or backboard. Box out. An attempt of blocking an opponent and setting up rebound opportunities where a defense player gets between a teammate and the basket. Next slide, please. Carrying the ball, also called palming. An illegal dribbling of the ball with both hands at the same time. Turning the ball over in your hands as if carrying it. Charging. An offensive foul which occurs when an offensive basketball player runs into a defender who has established position. Traveling. when the ball handler takes too many steps without dribbling, also called walking. Turnover, when the offense loses possession through its own fault by passing the basketball out of bounds or committing a foul violation. Next slide, please. Point guard. The point guard is the leader of the team. Point guards possess good ball handling and passing skills, and strong leadership. Shooting guard. The shooting guard is great at making shots beyond the three-point line. A few key stats for shooting guards are rebounds, assists, and scores. Small forward. The small forward is often the most versatile player, known for ball handling, passing, long and close range shooting, defense, and rebounding abilities. Power forward. The power forward is skilled at making jump shots and hook shots in the paint while posting up. Power forwards are great at dribbling and overall fantastic ball handlers. Next slide, please. Center. The center is typically the tallest player on the team. Centers are great at dunking near the basket in the paint for an easy layup. A key statistic for centers is rebounds. Fast break. A quick offensive drive toward a goal in an attempt to score before the opponent's defense is set up. Zone defense. A defense where each defender is responsible for an area of the court and must guard any player who enters that area. Lastly, goaltending. It is an interception of a shot that is either in the basket or directly above it. Next reporter, please.
Laws and rules of basketball. Next slide, please. Basketball basic rules. For object, a team is required to have 5 players on the court at all times, making 10 players on the court at a time. For playing area, the basketball court layout is rectangular in shape and is split in half by a mid-court line. There are 2 baskets, one located at each end of the court. The standard basketball ring is 10 feet off of the ground. Next slide, please. For starting play, teams are assigned a basket at which to shoot for the first half, and they switch ends at halftime. The game begins with a jump ball at center court between one player from each team. Other players line up in alternating fashion around the center circle. Once the ball is touched by either player, the game begins. The team in possession of the ball is on offense and takes the ball toward their basket to score against their opponent, who is on defense. Next slide, please. For fundamentals, the fundamental skills involved in the game include: the first one is dribbling. Dribbling is an advancing the ball up the court by bouncing it with one hand. Passing and catching. Moving the ball around the court by throwing it to teammates. Shooting, putting the ball through the hoop. Rebounding, gaining possession of the ball from a missed shot that bounces off the backboard or rim. Jumping is an important skill used in rebounding, shooting, and blocking shots. Defending is keeping the opponent with the ball from scoring. Moving without the ball. It is to get open for a pass or shot. Player must break away from their defenders and cut to openings on the court. Next slide, please. For the positions, a basketball team is made up of 5 different basketball positions. The youth basketball tips below will outline the main offensive and defensive roles of each one. Number 1 player is point guard. Number 2 player shooting guard, off guard wing. Number 3 player small forward. And number 4 player power forward. And lastly, the number 5 player is center. Next slide, please. For scoring, points are scored anytime the ball goes through the basket. 3 points, shot made beyond the 3-point line. 2 points, shot made from anywhere else on the court. 1 point is for the free throw. For the game length, games are divided into time segments known as periods. The length and number of each period differs between leagues. For example, college men's games are divided into 2 20-minute halves. College women's games are split into 4 10-minute quarters, while high school games are made up of 4 8-minute quarters. Next slide, please.
Fouls. Each player is allowed 5 fouls before they are removed from the game. Here are some basketball fouls. Blocking. A personal foul caused when the defender makes illegal personal contact with an opponent who may or may not have the ball. Blocking is called when the defender impedes the progress of the opponent. Charging or player control foul. A personal foul occurring when an offensive player makes contact with a defender who has already established a set position. A player with the ball must avoid contact with a stationary defender by stopping or changing direction. Elbowing. It is a violation for a player to swing the elbows excessively. Flagrant foul. A personal or technical foul which is violent in nature. Examples are fighting, striking, kicking, or kneeing an opponent. Handcheck. A personal foul caused by a defender making repeated contact with her hands on her opponent. Offensive foul. A foul caused by an offensive player, usually in the form of charging. Next slide, please. Holding. A personal foul caused by illegal contact with an opponent, which interferes with his freedom of movement. Intentional foul. A personal or technical foul which keeps the opponent from capitalizing on an advantageous situation. It could be contact away from the ball or contact when a defender is not making a legitimate attempt to play the ball or a player. It also occurs when a player causes excessive contact with an opponent. Personal foul. Illegal contact with an opponent while the ball is live, which hinders the opponent's offensive or defensive movement. A personal foul also includes contact by or an airborne shooter when the ball is dead. Technical foul. A non-contact foul by a player, an unintentional or flagrant contact foul while the ball is dead, or a violation charged to the head coach because of violations on the sideline or from bench personnel. Team foul. Any foul charged to a team. Once a team reaches 7 team fouls, its opponent is in a bonus free throw situation. Next slide, please. So for the violations. First, backcourt violation. If a player is the last one on her team to touch the ball before it goes into the backcourt, she cannot be the first player to touch it in the backcourt. Closely guarded or 5-second violation. Violation occurs that when a ball handler in his team's front court is continuously guarded by any opponent who is within 6 feet of him while he's either dribbling or holding the ball. The offensive player has 5 seconds or to either get rid of the ball or drive past the defender. Double dribble. When a dribbler touches the ball with both hands at the same time or when the dribbler picks up the ball then starts dribbling again. Goaltending occurs when a player touches a shot ball while it is in its downward flight above the rim. It also occurs when a defender touches a free throw attempt outside the basket. Lane violation. A violation called during a free throw situation against a player who enters the lane too soon. Next slide, please. 10 seconds in the backcourt. A team has a 10 seconds to advance the ball from their backcourt past the half-court line to the front court. 3 seconds in the lane. An offensive player cannot remain in the free throw lane for longer than 3 seconds while her team is in control of the ball in the front court. She has to clear the lane completely with both feet to stop the official's count. If she receives the ball while she is in the lane, she is allowed to stay beyond 3 seconds in order to drive forward the goal or for a shot. Traveling. A violation caused by moving the feet in any direction without properly dribbling the ball. It results in a turnover and the ball is given to the opposing team. While holding a ball, while holding the ball, a player has to establish a pivot foot which has to remain on the floor at all times until he passes, shoots, or dribbles. While holding the ball, his knee cannot touch the floor, and if he falls, he must get rid of the ball before attempting to get up. Next slide, please. So, there are the number of basketballs were used by the Denver Nuggets, an NBA team in 2019, was 943,092,675 basketballs. Next reporter, please.
So, for the court layout, so this is the layout of a basketball court. Next slide, please. The first one is the boundary lines. The boundary lines has two types, which are sideline and end line. So the sideline is the boundary lines on each side of the court, and the end line, also known as baseline, the boundary lines at the end of the court. So this is the picture where the sideline and end line is located. Next. Next is the court markings. Number one is the half-court line, also called mid-court, the line that runs from sideline to sideline across the center of the court. Second is the jump circle. There are three circles on the court: a center circle, a half-court, and a free throw circle around the free throw line at each end. Third is the free throw line, the line 15 feet from the basket that cuts the free throw circle in half. Fourth is the lane lines, the two lines that extend from the ends of the free throw line to the baseline surrounding the lane. Next slide, please. Number 5, low block, also called mid-court, the line that runs from sideline to sideline across the center of the court. 6 is the hash marks, the markings on each side of the key used for lining players up for free throws. And 7th is the three-point line, an arc extending from the baseline to the top of the key. A basket made by a player beyond this line is worth 3 points instead of 2. So this is the picture where the court markings are located. So for the number 1 is the half court line. The second is the jump circle in the middle. Number 3 is where the free throw line. The fourth one is the lane lines. Fifth, the low block. Sixth, the hash marks. And the seventh is the 3-point line.
Next, for the values behind basketball. Next slide, please. Basketball has 8 values in total, which will be discussed in the following slides. Next slide, please. First value is the inevitability of failure. Basketball legends such as Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, and LeBron James are remembered for their victories. They each won the Most Valuable Player or MVP award after assisting their team to several NBA championships. But that doesn't indicate that they haven't faced losses. Legendary players failed once or a lot of times too. Second is the value of teamwork. Basketball isn't something you can do on your own. Because it is a team sport, you will have the opportunity to interact with people from both your team and the opposing squad. You'll learn how to work together as a team and develop camaraderie. Teamwork also entails mutual respect. Next slide, please. Third value is the fitness and physical health. Basketball is one of the few big sports that involves the whole body. One of the most important life lessons kids can pick up from basketball is to value their body and take better care of their health. Otherwise, they won't be able to play. Achieving peak physical condition also means a lot of exercise and practice. Fourth is life lessons of patience. Patience is a virtue, as the saying goes. and basketball embodies this saying despite it being a physically active sport with a lot of fast movements. Aiming for the right shot, knowing when to pass, and mastering the ins and outs of the game all require a level of patience. Next slide, please. Fifth is grabbing every opportunity. There's a fear of failure, but dealing with that fear to grab every opportunity that comes their way is a life lesson of basketball. You'll never know if you would have made or missed a shot if you didn't throw the ball and give it a try. Sixth is hard work and determination. Getting good at basketball requires hard work. Players have to practice on a daily basis. They need to get back on their exercise routine whether they recently won or suffered a defeat. If their team loses, they'll need to stay focused and determined to get better. Getting better demands more hard work than before. This cycle promotes improvement through practice and concentration. Next slide, please. Seventh is pay attention to detail. Basketball is all about paying attention to even the smallest details. It will help us later on in life as we remain alert and aware of our surroundings, regardless if we're working or studying. And last is the mental and emotional stability. Defeat is inevitable, and for some, that loss is too much to bear. The amount of hard work and practice is also mentally and emotionally exhausting. Through basketball, people can learn to maintain stability in both aspects. Next reporter, please.
Now, let us proceed on the demo on basic skills of basketball. Next slide, please. There are 5 basic skills in basketball. First, dribbling. Dribbling is an important skill for all basketball players. This skill will allow you to move up and down the court, maneuver past defenders, and execute plays. Proper dribbling requires ball handling skills and knowledge of how to spread your fingers for ball control. Next slide, please. Here is a demo of dribbling. Second is shooting. In order to score points in basketball, you need to shoot the ball into the hoop. This requires the ability to properly hold and throw the ball into the air toward the basket while avoiding defenders. A proper shot requires precise aiming, arm extension, and lift from the legs. There are different types of shots you need to learn, including jump shots, layups, and free throws. Next slide, please. Here is a demo of shooting. Third, passing. Passing is another skill that when mastered can help you become a complete basketball player. Basketball is a team sport that involves finding a teammate who is open for a shot. The ability to pass the ball to this player can make the difference between scoring and not scoring. Really great passers are an important part of a basketball team and usually the ones who set up scoring plays. Next slide, please. Here is a demo of passing. Fourth, rebounding. Rebounding is one of the major skills of the game. It is your ability to jump with power to gain possession of the ball as it bounces to the rim after a failed shot before it touches the floor. Just how important is rebounding? Whenever you grab a rebound, your team gains a chance to shoot again, while the other team actually loses it. Next slide, please. Here is a demo of rebounding. And last but not the least, running. Running is one of the basic skills that a basketball player should possess, because in this sport, speed defines the best player. Whether you're on the offensive or defensive side of the game, passing, receiving, shooting, or rebounding a ball, you always have to run in any way possible. Next slide, please. Here is a demo of running.
And now, we will move on to the common mistakes in basketball. Next slide, please. Traveling. A player can only travel while holding the ball. There cannot be a traveling violation when a player is dribbling or fumbling the ball. The dribble must begin before the pivot foot is lifted from the floor. It is not possible for a player to travel while dribbling. Second, pivot foot. A player in possession of the ball may lift their pivot foot prior to releasing the ball when passing or shooting. However, if the pivot foot is lifted prior to the ball being released on a dribble, traveling must be called. Kicking the ball. Accidentally kicking the ball is not a violation. A kicked ball must be intentional and contact must be at the knee or below. Next is the self pass. There is no traveling violation for catching a ball that was an attempted shot that is an air ball. It is perfectly legal for a player to rebound their own air ball, provided the official deemed the shot a legitimate shot. Next is high dribble. A high dribble is always legal provided the dribbler's hand stays on top of the ball and the ball does not come to rest in dribbler's hand. Next is edges of the background. Any ball touching any of the supporting structures are considered out of play. The sides, top, and bottom of a rectangular backboard are inbounds. Next slide, please. Next is the 3-second violation. This violation can only be called while the team is in continuous control of the ball in its front court. Team control ends whenever a team shoots for the basket. 3 seconds cannot be called when a team repeatedly misses shots at the basket. Next, ball lodged in the background. It is a jump ball when the ball lodges on or in the basket support, except during a throw in or any free throw. These are violations. Next is the 10-second half court violation. Official starts the count once the ball is touched by a player on the court. The count continues until the offense has team control in their front court. Front court status is not established until both feet and the ball has crossed the line. Next, touching the boundary lines. The lines surrounding the court are out of bounds when touched by a player on the court. When touched by a player throwing in the ball from outbounds, the lines are still out of bounds and therefore there is no violation when a player touches but does not cross the line. 3 feet. Distance for a throw in is only required when a thrower cannot back up due to the constraints of the gym. Next, boxing out. It is a foul if a player pushes or backs up and moves another player out of an occupied space. First one to the spot owns it. Next slide, please. Reaching through the plane. A player may not reach through the plane on a throw in. A warning is given on the first offense to each team. If a player touches the ball while reaching through the plane, it is a technical foul. If the thrower holds the ball over the court area, defender may touch the ball. Next, the tip off. Jumpers may tap the ball simultaneously, may tap the ball twice, and when a legally tapped ball touches the floor, a player other than a non jumper or a backboard, the jump ball has ended, and either jumper may recover it. Next, reaching. Reaching is not a foul. There must be a contact, and the player with the ball must have been placed at a disadvantage. The ball is part of the hand. Striking the ball handler or shooter in the other hand on their hand while holding the ball is not a foul, no matter how noisy or how much it hurts. Charging. Player control foul. If a defender has his feet set and is facing the offensive player, then it is a player control foul. Typically, the official will look for contact in the chest area when determining the defensive player's position. No foul shots are taken even when the team is the bonus. Next slide, please. Over the back. There is no violation for jumping over or above. Another player to gain a rebound has long no contact was made. There is no such thing as over the back. There must be contact resulting in advantage or disadvantage. Do not put a tall player at a disadvantage merely for being tall. And moving pick or screen. A moving screen isn't a violation unless there is contact. If there is contact, it's a block, which is a foul. A player may not move into an opponent while trying to set a screen. If a player is setting the pick on the side of the opponent, he can be as close as he wants. If a player sets a pick from behind the opponent, then he must give that player a step backwards. Next slide, please. Surprising facts about basketball that you may not know. Okay, so number one, basketball was played with a different ball. As bizarre as it sounds, basketball was originally played with a soccer ball and peach baskets, with referees having to retrieve the ball each time a player made a basket. In 1900s, the string baskets we know today were introduced to the game, and later, backboards were attached to prevent spectators from blocking a shot. Second, the establishment of smaller squad. In basketball, each side has 5 players on the court at any given time. It has not always been like this. When basketball was invented, there was no limit to the number of players on the court. Therefore, teams could play with any number of players, and some had up to 50 players. However, each team would send 9 players to the court at a given time. This all changed in 1897, establishing the rule of 5 players for each side. Third, dribbling wasn't allowed. Players never could advance the ball. Instead, each player had to throw it from wherever he caught it. The first team credited with advancing the ball by dribbling it played at Yale in 1897. And the official allowance for the dribble, just one possession at first, were adopted 4 years later. Fourth, more players per side. This is somehow connected to the second fact. The number of players per side was never specified. Naismith invented an indoor winter activity and wanted a game flexible enough to include whoever wanted to play. For a while, the total number of players was a default 18, 9 per side, the same number that showed up for the very first game. The fifth, the three-pointer has not always been in the game. The three-point contest is also a popular event in the NBA Skills Challenge. It is officially known as a three-point field goal, and it is a shot made from beyond the three-point line. That is the arc that surrounds the basket on the court. If you make a shoot from there, you get 3 points. What you may know is the three-pointer has not always been in the game. It was introduced into the game after rules were adjusted following the 1979 to 1980 season.
Sixth, fouls played. Shouldering, pushing, holding, tripping, and striking opponents were never allowed in basketball, but were never considered fouls. However, in 1910, a rule was established disqualifying players from committing these four offenses. In 1946, they were raised to 5 by the Basketball Association of America's, then to 6 a year later. Seventh, referees used watches. Initially, the official duties of referees were timekeeping, although there wasn't much time to keep. The 24-second shot clock was only instituted instituted in 1954 to combat stalling tactics that various NBA teams had begun employing. 8. The Slam Dunk. The Slam Dunk contest is undoubtedly a highlight in the NBA Skills Challenge. The term slam dunk refers to when you leap above the net's rim while driving the ball into the net using one or both hands. This famous play was formerly known as a dunk shot. However, in 1972, Chick Hearn, an American announcer, used this term for the first time at an LA Lakers game, and it stuck. It is said that Robert Kurland was the first person to slam dunk in the 1940s. 9. The 1979 NCAA tournament was the start of basketball grades. College basketball remains one of the most popular sports, but spectators remember the Michigan State versus Indiana State college basketball game of 1979 during the NCAA tournament, which is one of the best-rated games in the sport's history. As a match-up between Magic Johnson and Larry Bird, who had never played each other prior to this tournament. This game marked the beginning of having basketball greats and NBA stars. And lastly, 10. Position rules changed in 1913. The game as we know it gives possession of an out-of-bounds ball to the player who last had contact with it, but that wasn't always the case. Prior to 1913, a referee would pick up and throw an out-of-bounds ball down the court, and the first player to touch it retained possession. The rules eventually changed because of the increase in number of player injuries. Next slide, please. And that would be all for our report. Thank you.